Into his presence would I enter now. Into his presence would I enter now. Into his presence would I enter now.
That includes all of our announcements. I would like to read the following before we go into our time together with Brian. This is from chapter 2 of A Course in Miracles, and many of you are probably familiar with it. I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do, because he who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever he wishes. Knowing he goes there with me, I will be healed as I let him teach me to heal. And I think that's the extent of our, just to let you know that the music that we're going to be hearing during the break is from Jeff Olmsted. Jeff was the music director of the church that I had in New York City throughout the 90s. And he put together this wonderful series called A Course in Miracles. You'll be hearing that later. So, hi, Brian.
Greetings.
And welcome. It's so good to see you.
Thank you very much, John.
Yeah, so
good to see you too.
Yeah, it's exciting to have you here with us and to be talking about your work. Why don't you actually even go into just a little bit about your background in terms of what inspired you to begin to pay attention, to listen, to hear, and to share?
Well, there was a lot going on from spirit that I knew nothing about when I was in my late teens. And at that point, I felt an inward draw to move to Canada from England when I was 19. Someone who I, not a year or so later, 2 years maybe later, I discovered was known as the rector, because he had been a rector of an Anglican church, first in Ireland and then in Vancouver. And he, I discovered in 2007, it was revealed to me, he and I had been sibling brothers in an incarnation in the 1500s, but he had been he laid aside his body in his most recent incarnation in 1940. And he'd been working with me behind the scenes, and I knew nothing about this consciously. But he got me out to Canada, and I was drawn to a lady who'd written a book called Between Time and Eternity. And she became my spiritual mentor. Now, she had had many manifestations of Jesus, communication with him over decades, starting in the early part of the 20th century. And I was brought to her. I realized in 2007, that she had also been my sibling sister 500 years ago. So she and the rector and I had been together as siblings 500 years ago. And that was only made known to me consciously in 2007. Well, because of the way she spoke about Jesus, this awakened in me a great passion, a great desire to get to know and experience the real living Jesus, not just hear about him from other people. So it came to the point where I would kneel at my bedside, this was late 1966, every night, and speak to Jesus and say how greatly I longed to experience his livingness, so that I could be aware of his reality rather than just hearing about it. And this went on for several months. And then in January 1967, as I had completed my nightly outpouring to him, I got up and started making ready for bed, and suddenly he was there. in the corner of the room. I was in a basement lodging, and he was there. And as I became aware of him, he started moving toward me. Well, he wasn't walking. He was above the ground, maybe a couple of inches, and he was gliding across toward me. And as he started moving, he began to speak. And the words that he spoke, which I'd never heard before, are recorded in the book of Revelation. And he said, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Any man who hears my voice, if any man hear my voice, I will come into him and will sup with him, and he with me." Well, I knew with every fiber of my being exactly what he meant by that, even though it's quite a mystical statement, and I'd never heard it before. And by the time he'd finished making that statement, he had arrived within less than a foot from my face, and we were eyeball to eyeball. And looking into his eyes, I was looking into eternity. An experience that few of us will encounter with our fellows walking the earth today, because most of us have still got the remnants of an ego to a greater or lesser extent. But there was no ego in Jesus at all. His aura extent that as I became aware of it, extended outward from him about an arm's length in both directions, above and down, so that it was a kind of oval shaped aura. And it was multicolored. It was what I call heaven blue, which is a dark but not navy blue. It was gold, living gold light and white light. But the most important thing was not what I saw, but the energy coming from him. And this was love. It was love like I had never encountered, never heard anything about. It was tender, it was gentle, it was all encompassing, it was personal. I knew that he loved me personally in an intimate way, such as no other living being I'd ever encountered, including my own parents, loved me. But that love applies to us all. There is not a living soul on earth today for whom his love is not extended in exactly the same degree, which is absolute. Well, I was completely overcome by the power of his love. And as I became completely enwrapped in his aura, the love was filling me from head to toe. And I felt as if my heart was growing to the size of a football and was going to burst out of my chest cavity. And it was, the love was so powerful that the only way I can describe it in earthly terms is that it was like an orgasm of the soul. It was complete, comprehensive. Every part of my being experienced the intensity of that love, and yet it was so gentle. So that started me. He came in response to my asking, and that's hugely important. If we want to experience the living Jesus, we have to seriously, from here, mean it, desire it, steadfastly, unwaveringly, and he will make himself known to us. I dare say some who are here today are already aware of his livingness within their hearts, their minds, their lives, and are experiencing his guiding. And he's been guiding me, tutoring me, leading me on this journey from the valley of the shadow of death, as described by King David in the book of Psalms, which is this world, this dream world of separation from God. And we can make steps up the hill of the Lord, which is also from the book of Psalms, until we reach the summit of the hill of the Lord and join with him there. And that's when our journey to creating a new beginning, the kingdom of heaven on earth, which we are integral in its establishing, its manifesting, along with Jesus. Jesus is not high and mighty and lifted up. We are equal to him. He knows who he is, and he knows who we are, that we are equal to him. But we are pretending an absurd game that we're unworthy, that we've had centuries of being told that we're sinners and that we are unworthy of his love. That is not true at all. He loves us as we love him. And he said to me one morning, every morning, the first thing I do is unload the dishwasher. And as I was unloading the dishwasher on this Sunday morning, about 6 months ago, he was there sitting on the countertop beside me as I was doing this, unloading the dishwasher. And as I became aware of him, I started to tell him, as I've told him a million times, how much I love him, how much he means to me, that he is everything to me. And I went on with this for about a minute. And he sat there looking at me and listening. He didn't move. He wasn't shy. He wasn't embarrassed. He was listening caringly. And when I had finished, he looked at me and he said, "Everything that you have just said about me is exactly the way I feel about you."
Nice.
Now, that is so important. If we could say that to ourselves and accept to ourselves that that is how Jesus feels about us, rather than all this, "Oh, I'm unworthy." It's not true. We've got to stop believing the lies and accept the reality that we are the Son of God along with Jesus equally. And as he helps us to awaken from this dream of separation, so is we regain our power, and that power is love, and love is the power of creation. And that's why Jesus was able to perform all the things that are recorded of him in the gospel records, because he was love, and we are love also. Let's stop believing the lies that we're darkness, we're sinners, we're evil. It's
one of the workbook lessons on A Course in Miracles is I am as God created me. And the Course is very, very strong on the fact that we're all equals here.
Yes.
When you're looking across at someone, you're looking across at an equal. And I don't care if it's a child or an adult or whatever it is, we're all equals. It's the only way that can be.
Yes. So that's how I got started. And I've been on this journey with Jesus since the 1960s.
Right.
I met Teresa there. Oh, and we met at night school typing class, of all things, in 1968. And there were 2 sessions a week, Tuesday for 2 hours, Thursday for 2 hours. And so that's where we met. And we obviously knew each other. We'd never met in this life before, but there was an inner knowing that we belonged together. Nice. And after the second session on Thursday, when I dropped her back at her place, as I was getting into bed in my own apartment in Vancouver, Jesus came to me and he said, "I have brought the little one to you to be your companion of the way." Now that was in response to my asking him 3 months earlier while I was here in England on a leave of absence. And I said to him, if it is serviceable for me to be celibate in serving this purpose that you are calling me to, then I'm willing to do that. However, you know as well as I do, beloved, that I have as many red corpuscles coursing through my veins as the next man. So if you've got someone out there, please bring us together. Well, that was in November 67. And in March 68, back in Vancouver, we met at night school typing class. So, and then after we first met 3 days later, he came and said, I have brought the little one to you. He could have said, in response to your request,
Right.
to be your companion of the way. And we've been together 53 years,
Nice.
married 51, nearly 52 of those.
Right.
And we're still talking to each other. So
Very good.
there's something to be said for asking Jesus to bring the right person into your life.
In fact, as I suspect that not only talking, but growing deeper in the commitment and the awareness that's there.
Yes.
That happens when you get to be that long together.
Right. And our love it's greater. It grows.
That's what
Our
I mean.
togetherness. Yeah. We are becoming more and more aware of what's going on in each other's mind. We say the same thing at the same time, increasingly. The mind-to-mind communion between us is growing day by day. It's a
So what do you think about that in terms of not just with our mates, but with our other kind of mates, like-minded folks that we're with?
Yes.
Right? The folks that are on with us right now, for example.
Well, Linda, who is here, Linda Down, she lives in Northamptonshire in England, and we connected about 4 years ago at an event down near the south coast of England, and we've been communicating ever since. And there's nothing that Linda and I can't share. We talk on Skype pretty well every week, and it's as if we are joined at the hip. Mm-hmm. And that's becoming increasingly the case with more and more people.
Sure. It's really good knowing that we're not alone, not in the least bit. I think one of the things that we do is we do this kind of work, whether it's the work of the Course or any other process.
Yes.
You have that sense of, well, the Course talks about our basic function here is communication, but communication leading to communion. Yes. The more we communicate, the more we get to communion as being the task that we're all here to fulfill. And you've been doing a good job. Let's tell about how the first book that you came to write, how that came into being.
Okay, well, the first book is entitled Seek Ye First the Kingdom, One Man's Journey with the Living Jesus. And I knew that by the late 90s or early part of the new millennium, I knew that I had to write a book because I'd had so many wondrous experiences with the living Jesus over getting on or more than 40 years. And if I came to the point of breathing my last and hadn't made any effort to share that with anyone else who might be interested, that I would be filled with a profound regret that I had had all these precious experiences and not taken any trouble to share them. So I wrote about 80,000 words of this book, which ended up becoming Seek Ye First the Kingdom. And eventually it was 120,000 words. And at first that was, I published that on my website. But eventually I was guided to a publisher who took this on and published it. And I thought, well, that's it. I've written my book, and now that's the end of it. But then 2 years later, it was published in 2012. And in 2014, 3 different people who didn't know each other said to me within 3 weeks of each other, when are we going to see another book from you? We know there's one in there. Well, if one person had said it, I'd have said, yeah. And ignored it. But 3 people saying the same thing within 3 weeks caused me to say, if I don't listen to this, I don't know what my inner promptings are going to be guiding me towards. So I decided that I could write another book, which was entitled, here we are, Finding the Kingdom Within, which is inevitable. If we're seeking first the kingdom, we will find it. not by dint of our own efforts, but by dint of our desire and our commitment, and under leading from Jesus. And he will bring us to the place where we find the kingdom which is within us. It's not out there, it's within us. So that book was published on Easter Day 2016. And 3 days later, the Holy Spirit gave me the title of another 5 books that I was to write out of the blue, faster than I could write them down. I scrabbled for a piece of scrap paper and a pencil to write it on, because it took me completely by surprise. And here they are.
Did you say anything like, really, 5 books, 7 books?
I can tell you that was pretty daunting.
Yeah, that's a bit daunting, I think,
done.
right? Yeah, right.
It's done. So
But you did it. Yeah.
Yes. So if we are seeking first the kingdom, it is inevitable that we will find it. So what do we want to do when we found the kingdom? We will want to enter the kingdom within. Here. And all the cover illustrations for these books, except the last one, were visions that I had had over a period of a few years. And this is Jesus leading a little girl and a little boy, which symbolize any and all of us.
Right.
But in one sense, it's Teresa and me as little children.
Sure.
But it's all of us. So when we enter the kingdom, we can begin living from the kingdom within. And when we have lived and been living from the kingdom within for any period of time, we're getting to understand what the kingdom within is really all about. There's still plenty to learn, but we're taking those first baby steps. And we get to the point where, not by our own efforts, but by the leadership of the Lord of the Great Rescue Program that's taking place now on planet Earth and elsewhere throughout the universe, but by the help of Jesus. And we will then be brought to the place where other people will come to us so that we can begin to share the kingdom within. Then when we've been doing that for a while, there will become an exponential increase in that level of sharing, so that we become able to extend the kingdom within much further afield, around the world. People who we've never met, know nothing about, will be drawn to us so that we can do that extending. And then, of course, at that point, we end up being the kingdom within. So that's the seven books that I knew nothing about. But Jesus told me at least twice that I can recall that this journey that I had embarked upon as persona Brian was agreed between him and me aforetime, which is the word he used, meaning before I incarnated. And that was as a result of having the desire. That was events that had occurred 400 years ago in an incarnation, where there was some church activity that was old order church. We're all sinners and we mustn't have any joy in our life because we're unworthy of it.
God forbid.
And I had an awakening experience during that 1600s incarnation, when I was a farmer right here in this county, Gloucestershire.
Wow.
I was a farmer named Paul, and I suddenly had this awakening experience that the church, as it was then, the Puritan church, was a sham, that it was promulgating the lies that we're sinners and we're unworthy of God's love, none of which is true.
Right.
So I decided then that I would, when I laid aside my body, at the end of that incarnation, that I would want to meet up with Jesus so that I could see if there was some way in which I could help people to move beyond the lie of separation, to understand that we're loved by God, that we're his beloved children. And he's calling us home, as A Course in Miracles tells us. So then I came back here as Brian. I only found this out since the turn of the millennium. All this was new to me, including that I had apparently agreed to write 7 books. But here we are. And these are stepping stones. We go one step at a time from the valley of the shadow of death up through this 7-step program until we arrive at the summit of the hill of the Lord, where we become as one with Jesus. And that's the place where we're now arriving at, we, humanity. Most of humanity has no understanding or awareness or even interest or desire for it. But that's only at the conscious level. And the conscious mind is so small compared with our subconscious mind, which is the whole of our awareness of reality. And that is gradually being subsumed by the subconscious awakening, the great awakening that's taking place within us. Right now, we're in that time.
Oh, I definitely feel it. I think a lot of people definitely feel it. There's something definitely that's going to this. One of the things we see that manifest here, and I know it's true in England too, and all over Europe, is the death of the church. I mean, the death of the traditional church, because something really needs, and something is here. We have the Course in Miracles, we have your work, and not just the Course in your work, but many other works that like this that all of a sudden are coming here and coming in the same way, coming by some sort of direct communication was. I think Helen Shugman, who wrote the Course in Miracles, who would not have known this in the beginning, but as time went by, she got declared that this was a pre-planned thing. This was supposed to happen. She was supposed to do this. And she did it. She did it remarkably. And I knew Helen, and what was one of the things that was remarkable is the way she kept herself out of it. She just stepped back. I mean, step back and let me lead the way. Well, she stepped back and let him lead the way. And it got done, and it's out there, and it's having its effect, as your work is having its effect, and these other works are having their effects now.
Untold works from untold other people, untold other people, people coming out of the woodwork, so to speak.
Right.
It's the most exciting time in the history of humanity by a country mile.
Just as a reference, I can't help but think when I was in seminary, I guess it was, I read John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed by that book because it was like the hero journey story, and he goes through the valley of the shadow of death and the sloth of despond and all these, but it's all, and that was the most popular selling book except for the Bible up to the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Because there's something in the human psyche that identified with that and said, yes, this must be the process that we go through. So your books are just another step in that process.
Yeah. And there are so many more as well.
Yeah. Very exciting.
Exciting times. The most exciting times.
It really is. And we're very fortunate to be here and very fortunate to be engaged in this process.
And thank goodness for the technology we have that can help it. Imagine if we still had to handwrite a letter and send it by sea from Europe to America, which would take 3 weeks. And then your reply would take another 3 or 4 weeks to come back.
Yeah, I know. It's remarkable. You and I are talking as though we're sitting in the same room and we're several thousands of miles apart, which is very, very exciting.
Yeah.
And this is going to keep happening. And more so.
Yeah, the pace is quickening. If we look back over, let's say, the last 10 years, the amount of change that is taking place and has taken place in just those few 10 years has been staggering, where even 10 years ago, the world's attitude towards climate change and pollution, and the fact that humanity is like an aphid living on a cabbage, which is going to keep breeding and destroy its own environment. But all that's changing. And the young people today are really committed to helping to change the way the world is functioning. And the politicians are starting to actually take notice. Some of them, anyway.
So
We better not get into politics, have we?
no, that's what we would definitely avoid that. So how do you see some of these changes occurring internally inside each of us? What does that mean? The kingdom of heaven is inside you. It's not in the body, obviously, but it's in the mind.
Yes.
But what does the mind have to do to make the switch over itself?
What I have been finding in the last few weeks is that the changes of awareness that are taking place within me are engaging the joining of the mind, you use the head as indicating the mind,
Sure.
and the heart, and the two are coming together, joining in a state of union or unity and holy relationship with a joined purpose. And so even a year ago, there was still plenty of things that I was looking at, observing about what's going on in the world and making judgments without even having to think about it. A negative judgment would be there. But now, particularly in the last few weeks, couple of months, and increasingly so, everything I look at now, I'm seeing as if it's through Christ's eyes, only with love and compassion and caring and understanding that I'm aware of why people are behaving the way they are. It's the consciousness of fear. And when someone is full of fear, what they need is love. And if we if we only respond to fear with more fear, that is not going to get us home. But when we respond to people's fear with love and compassion and understanding and tolerance and all those good kingdomly qualities, then we are finding that there is nothing left within us which is going to drag us back down. I'm not saying I'm there fully yet, but in the last weeks, maybe a couple of months, I'm feeling as if I'm getting released from baggage, burdens that I've been carrying around, as most of us have been for most of our lives. So it's coming, it's increasing. And so I believe that is the time when this is going to be happening with those who sincerely, steadfastly desire the great awakening to the reality of the kingdom of heaven on earth.
So I'm aware that there's steps and stages that we're talking about here. That some of the early parts of this are purgation, letting go, releasing the false identity, for one thing, and that can be a little difficult along the way. That's a little painful, because that's who I thought I was. No, that's not working. So now I've got to become more aware of the Christ, to be the Christ.
Yes.
All right.
I used to say over the decades, and particularly when I was in the earlier years of my journey back in the 1960s, I used to say to my spiritual mentor, Olga Park, it isn't enough to be Christian. We have to be Christ-like. And that's the only way we're going to actually emerge from the darkness of this world.
Right. I love the definition. I love the definition of Jesus that appears in the Course in Miracles. It says, it's in the manual. It says, Jesus was a man who saw the face of Christ in all of his brothers and sisters and remembered God. How do you do that? By seeing it, by seeing the face of Christ. You remember the face. Right? That's just such a beautiful. It boomerangs. It's a flashback. It's just, it all comes back to it. Of course, as projection makes perception. Well, it depends on what you're projecting. But there's a kind of extension. Of course, talks about extension, which is just the extension of love, and that extension of love also boomerangs. Thank God.
Yes.
It's exciting stuff.
So we could say, and I've been doing this, I've been saying to myself, so where does this lead us? When we have become Christ-like,
sure,
what next?
Yeah.
Is that the end of the road, or is there something more
Sure.
waiting to emerge from within us? Now, in the Bible, Jesus gives us a few clues. One of which is, the works that I do, you shall do also, and greater works than these, because I go to my Father, blah, blah, blah. So how are we going to do that when we're holding grievances and making judgments about the world and sending out negative energy? When there's another term for soul, and that is energy force field. And if we imagine ourselves as a dynamo generating energy, that energy is, when we're moving in the right direction, is light, and light and love are the same. So we're out of our energy force field centered in our heart while we're embodied, we're sending out, we're generating love energy, and that is the way in which we connect with others who are of like heart and mind. So when we decide that we've had enough of grievances and judgments and negative thinking, we can focus increasingly until that's the sum of our focus on love and light and goodwill and compassion and caring and all those wonderful kingdomly qualities. And then we start to become like Christ. Well, Jesus is our example life for becoming like Christ, that we can look to, we can follow. And then we'll be able to become restored to our Christ empowerment, just as Jesus was. And so that means that the works that he did, we'll find ourselves doing. And this is the time in the 21st century when that's starting to take off, and more people are experiencing that inner transformation, like a caterpillar emerging from the chrysalis and finding that it wasn't a caterpillar after all. It was always a butterfly pretending to be something other, crawling, creeping around on multiple legs on the ground. And then it goes into that inner state of being reborn of the spirit, as Jesus says in the Bible and in ACIM. And so we emerge and we're soaring with rainbow colors on our wings, living the kingdom. It's so exciting. I could talk about this all day.
Well, good. It's a lot of fun. I sometimes think, or say, does a butterfly remember the caterpillar?
Very good question. Very
good.
I
mean, it's like, it's so far beyond it, really. It's like we've transcended literally the Course in Miracles says the body is, I mean, we love our bodies, I suppose, but you can overdo that in a big way. Your Course is, the most frequent phrase in the Course is, I am not a body, I am free. For I am God created. That requires some real learning. Some real remembering.
Thank goodness we can hold fast to that and actually eventually come to the place where we accept that it is actually true.
Yes, it's actually true.
Yeah.
And it always has been. Which means that this then becomes the dream. I mean, the ordinary bodily life becomes the dream.
Yes.
Right.
And John, I don't want to get too personal with you, but I believe you and, is it Dolores, your wife?
Yes.
You've been married for around half a century, haven't you?
Half a century, yes.
Yes. So doing this, emerging from the chrysalis in unity and relationship with a beloved companion of the way, that really helps.
It really does. And I've really found that it was interesting what COVID did for us, because I used to travel a lot, and being gone so much didn't always work well. So then we kind of got into this cocoon of a relationship, and it's just been wonderful in terms of the development that's occurred there, because it happened together, which is the only way it can happen, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Sure.
And eventually, when we're so blessed to be in such a loving relationship, like Teresa and I are in, although it wasn't always sweetness and light, we went through some very difficult time in the early years.
That's normal.
Yeah. Yes, we had some issues to resolve, and that was part of the reason for us being here. But we've resolved them because we were committed to resolving them, and we worked at it. And now our relationship is so free-flowing, so loving, so tender, so gentle. I commend it to, this relationship arrangement to anyone and everyone.
I like to put it in terms of the C's. So if you got the commitment and the communication, then you got the communion, and that's what makes it also very, very exciting, right?
Yeah.
And then what you've got is another C, which is contentment.
Yes.
The plain contentment of just being present. And so there's not kind of questions going on about what's going on. You kind of know. Right?
Inwardly know.
Inwardly know, yeah, that this is cool. I mean, this is where we're supposed to be. This is the kingdom, if you will, in that sense, right?
Yeah.
It's a loving place, which is what the kingdom is, right?
I used to think the universe was not a very loving place, but I now see through the illusions of all the conflict to the fact that love is behind everything. Right. And so once we see that, we start to experience that love. And the journey becomes easy. And the questions that one used to ask, because one simply didn't know or understand, we then find that we know intuitively. And if a point arises in my mind, as I'm starting to formulate what's this all about, the answer is given before I've even formulated the question. Mm-hmm. And that shows that our connectedness to the divine is actually real. And if we stay steadfast on our focus and our commitment to that, then it will happen. It emerges from our own within. Truly, the kingdom is within.
Then you're at your book, Being the Kingdom.
Yes.
Being the Kingdom, which is wonderful. Now that's very Zen, by the way.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, Zen is just about being, its presence, just awareness. Yeah, you're just there. There's no problems. Right. Contentment.
Okay. I see that someone has just asked a question. Are we going to address these questions?
Well, yes and no. Yes, we're definitely going to address the question, but we're very near the time we're going to take our midpoint break.
Yes.
So we'll take our midpoint break first before we do that.
Yes.
And then we'll come back and we'll dialogue. First, Bud will let us know about whatever's been going on in the chat to see if there's any kind of general questions that we can address. And then after that, people can individually raise their hands and speak to you. Okay. Yes. Seeing how we're talking about this now, why don't we go ahead and do that now? It's 12:51 here. So Bud, you want to go ahead and take us into our intermission time? And everyone, you've got 10 minutes. You can go get a drink or bathroom or whatever you want to do. Or you can sit here and enjoy this singing and chant along with Jeff Olmsted and our former choir. What's it going to be called, Bud?
The hush of heaven holds my heart today.
The hush of heaven holds my heart today. Just
hallelujah.
The hush of heaven holds my heart today. hush of heaven holds my heart today. The hush of heaven.
All right, we're back. And we were first we'll look to see, Bud, what did you gather from looking at the dialogue that was going on in the chat before we see if there's any direct questions?
We had a number of really good questions. So let me see if I can just summarize some of them. One of them was one that came in even before we met, as you both recall. And so that question is, why don't we start with it? How is the best way we can help someone else who's in pain or going through a difficult time, especially when our faith isn't that well developed? How do we know that our prayers are helping this person?
Okay, would you like me to respond to that,
Yes,
John?
go ahead, Brian.
Most of us in this world think that we've got to be doing something. Well, we're not human doings, we're human beings. And being is what we're really here to remember that we are. This is not being at the horizontal axis or earth, mind, conscious level, where we've got to paint the fence or do the washing up or whatever. All those go without saying. But being is the way in which we connect with our inner self, because that is what we are. We are being the kingdom within. So when most of us feel pretty inadequate about how can we help someone who's just had a bereavement or whatever, we don't have to do anything, although sometimes offering condolence and a loving shoulder for the bereaved person, etc. But the most important thing we can do is love and bless. And bless is arguably the most powerful energy in creation after love. And when we bless a person, we don't have to sit and wait for the reaction and the event to have had its effect or its impact on the person we're blessing. We hand that over to the Holy Spirit or God or Jesus. But sending out the blessing, we are, as I said earlier, an energy force field. And when we bless, we're sending out that blessing energy. Now that energy is harvested, if you like, by the Holy Spirit. And he will take that energy and he will apply it in the way that he knows it can best work. And the person who is the intended recipient may not even be, and probably won't be aware of the gift that is being brought to them by the Holy Spirit from our blessing. And it may not work out for some time, weeks, months, years, but the blessing is always beneficial. It always is if it is love and heart centered, without any requirement for us to have some egoic satisfaction from having blessed someone. If it's not from our heart, then it's not real. And so sending a love and blessing, which I think the questioner, Susan Oliver, she is saying, if we aren't very well along on our own path of spiritual awakening and are feeling fairly inadequate in these matters, how can we be of help? Well, we don't have to do anything, just love and bless. But it's got to come from our heart. And that will end up, regardless of how long it takes, having the effect that we have desired for that person, which is for their comfort, their helping, their easing of their distress, whatever.
I think one of the things that's really most important too is what you're saying, though, with presence, just the pure presence, just being there, but just being a loving presence, even if you don't have the right words. But if the love is there and your presence is there, that'll be felt. And that's the only thing that's needed to change things. Right?
When my brother-in-law passed away in 1979, aged only 35.
Wow.
His widow was inconsolable, as you can imagine.
Sure.
They had a 3-month-old baby girl.
Oh,
And people this was John and Carolyn, the widow. And after John had gone, if she was walking down the street and saw someone she knew and they saw her, they would cross the street because they were too fearful of what to say to Carolyn. And that was very hurtful to her.
of course.
Well, most of us find it hard to know what to say to someone who's going through a situation like that. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that we care.
Right.
And that we show that we care. We could go up to Carolyn or whoever when instead of crossing the street to get away from them because we don't know what to say, just go and embrace them and hold them and let them know. We can say, I don't know what to say, sweetheart, Carolyn, whoever. I don't know what to say, but I do want you to know that I care. And that's what counts.
There are a few times in the Course in Miracles where God is actually referred to as presence. Just the pure presence, the loving presence. That's all we need.
Yeah.
What else, Bud?
Well, here's a fun question. How do I continue to seek possible next steps around fulfilling my purpose? I don't want to miss any opportunities I have during this time on earth.
I love that. I really love that because most of us don't want to miss something that is intended. Well, we have someone who is very capable of taking care of what we're not intended or not wanting to miss. And that's Jesus, it's the Holy Spirit. But if we're focusing, as I tend to do, not that this is exclusive, but he's my buddy, sitting there on the Mount of Olives, looking down over old Jerusalem, across the Kidron Valley. And that was a stitching that my wife did. So he knows all our needs, all our requirements, and we need to retrain our mind into staying close to him so that he can then nudge us with whatever it is that we're fearful of missing. And when we hand it over to him, he's like our personal assistant, much better. He doesn't forget anything. He knows what's coming up. He knows what's needed before we even become aware of it ourselves. So we don't need to be anxious that we're missing something. I've been there, we've all been there, but we can retrain our mind away from fear, doubt, and anxiety. FDA. I use a lot of acronyms in my writings.
Right.
But FDA, fear, doubt, anxiety. We don't need any of that. Jesus didn't have fear, doubt, and anxiety. He was comfortable that he was being looked after. He had the help, it says in the Bible, of 12 legions of angels. Well, I think a legion is 1,000, but he had enough. But he never needed to call them into battle stations, as it were, because he knew the peace of God was within him and he was comfortable with that. He was at rest in that. And we can be also. And if we want to be like him, we've got to start thinking like him and living like him and being like him. Now, the ego would say, well, that's impossible. It's too tall an order. But that's a lie. It isn't difficult. It may take a long time. It's taken me 50 years. But so what? We've got forever. All we have to do is choose, desire, and commit to staying steadfastly on the journey toward the light. And it becomes easier and easier and easier every day, every year. And the alternative is to stay in the muddle that we've got ourselves into. Just try watching the 6 o'clock news to get the details if we're interested. I
Maybe
don't recommend
not to watch it.
No, I don't recommend watching the 6 o'clock news.
Well, if you got to do it dispassionately. Don't take it personally.
Yes.
News is an opportunity for massive forgiveness. That's what it is.
Yes.
Anything else there, bud, or shall we go?
Here, we got a few more questions.
Okay.
Here's a great question. Brian, as we know, we are not a body, but we have them. How do you suggest relating to the body we experience?
Well, there are several approaches to this that come to mind. And one that I seem to recall from A Course of Love is where Jesus says to us, try stepping back from your body as you're walking down the road and getting engrossed in all the anxieties, how are we going to pay the mortgage? Are the kids going to get on drugs? Whatever. Try stepping back from the body that's walking down the street, observing that it is still you, but that you are detached from it so that you can observe from an objective rather than a subjective approach. I've practiced this and it's excellent. It works. And we can say, okay, there's really nothing that is outside my capability. There was nothing outside Jesus's capability when he was with a body or in a body. And that's because it was his heart and mind joined in unity and relationship, which empowered him. Now we have disempowered ourselves by the separation consciousness, guilt, fear, doubt, judgment, all those things that cause turmoil in our inner being. But we can go within, enter into the stillness within. And I practice this multiple times, day and night, and it gets easier day by day to enter into that stillness. And it's a very different place from the clamor of this world. We can, within a second or two, we can change from the clamor of the outer world that's trying to gate crash our life and enter into the stillness where all is peace, all is freedom, all is, we can let go of it all. It's nothing. The external world, we're here to share our kingdom presence within us. And our body is a vehicle, a mechanism by which we can share that. But it has to come from our heart and mind in order for the body to be activated for that. We don't need to go out looking for people that we can outpour our compassion on. If there's anyone nearby or far away, now we've got global communication capability, anywhere, anyone, anywhere, they will be brought to our awareness from the Christ consciousness within us, from Jesus walking with us in loving companionship. We don't have to be concerned that, oh, I haven't done my good deed for the day. When Jesus brings someone to me that I can pour my compassion upon, he'll do it when the circumstances are right. And it all just happens freely, easily, without any effort.
Right.
I hope that helps.
I might add to that the Course is very clear that the body is a learning device. That's what it calls it. So if it's a learning device, then I want to keep this device working well so that I can learn what it is I need to learn. So I'm conscious enough to know that I want to keep this thing healthy and functioning well so that I can do what I'm here to do and not be all caught up in pleasuring the body or doing something which is actually going to harm the body rather than help it be a useful tool in this world.
Yes, we're our own worst enemy most of the time.
Yeah.
That actually is a great segue into the next question.
Okay.
So what do you gentlemen think is the message or messages or lessons that the pandemic has taught us? Is this a way that the whole world can change its consciousness?
Oh, yes. Oh, wow. This is the biggest opportunity within the Great Rescue Program that humanity has suddenly been brought into the presence of inescapably. And I often liken it to, because I used to love the cowboy and Indian westerns. We had cowboy comics and all that stuff, the Buffalo Bill annual and all that business. And so very often in those stories, there'd be a herd of buffalo, which are actually bison, but we call them buffalo. And they're stampeding. And there's a precipice. And if that stampede isn't turned and stopped, then those buffalo will all go over the precipice and be dashed on the rocks below. Well, that's a good analogy of humanity. We have been stampeding en masse to the precipice, and we're at the brink, at the edge of oblivion in terms of this world being a habitable place with what we've been doing to it. Well, here's COVID-19, a brick wall, and we've hit it. So, well, some of us, we seem to have hit it and been hurt by it, but it's actually stopped us from going over the precipice. So we've now got an opportunity to have a rethink. And even governments are starting to say, yeah, we better get it right this time, amazingly. And that's probably the first time in my living memory of governments taking any concern for the environment. It's always been the economy. Well, the economy is going to grind to a halt without cooperating with the environment, because without environment, there can be no economy. And so COVID-19 has been a real game changer. And although we may think we're near the end of it, it keeps having an outbreak of some new variant. So how long this will continue, I believe, depends on how willing we are to take it seriously and cooperate in the learning the lessons that we have called into our own presence to learn by. And that is, there's only one of us. We cannot function in the separation consciousness. It's over. That's the good news. It's over. And the pandemic has been the mechanism that has brought stampeding humanity to a halt, or virtually. It's a great gift to us all.
The other wonderful part about it is that it's forced so many of us to, being cloistered as we were, to go within. You didn't have a choice. You couldn't go out, and by going within gave us really the opportunity to look for the kingdom within, not knowing that that's what we'd be doing. And as I said, in terms of relationships too, been a benefit. And then the external part of it is that, well, here we are all talking to each other all around the world. I don't know we've been doing this with Zoom like this if COVID hadn't come along. We all know that.
Yeah. Let's
see what else we have. Shall we go to some of the questions, Bud, or you have something more?
We got one more question, and then we can go to the people, if that's okay.
Okay, good.
So Brian, can you speak about your Spirit Rescue Program?
Okay, well, back in the early 70s, Jesus introduced to me a term which he called his Great Rescue Program. And that is effectively what's taking place now, but there's a parable in the Bible called the 3 measures of meal. It's the shortest parable, I believe, in the scriptures. And Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is like unto yeast, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal until the whole was leavened. Well, my understanding, and I've written about this, my understanding of that parable is that the 3 measures of meal each one is a 2,000-year epoch. The first one beginning with the incarnation of Abraham. That's the first measure of meal. The second measure of meal began effectively with the incarnation of Jesus. Excuse me. The third measure of meal, which is we're now at the beginning of, is the kingdom measure of meal. And all three measures of meal are essential, because the third measure of meal needed the first and second measure. It's like bread making. You've got to take some of the yeast from the previous batch of bread that you're making, like with sourdough bread, and mix it in so that it will leaven the next measure. And the Jesus measure, the last 2,000 years, have been the leaven which has been taken and put into the third measure of meal, in which the whole becomes leavened. So the Great Rescue Program is a 6,000-year, nominally, program. And we are now in the third semester of that 6,000-year phase. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to take another 2,000 years for the Great Awakening or the Great Rescue Program to be completed, because the awakening is not going like this, it's going like this. And we're here, somewhere here. We're in the place where the acceleration is taking place. And if this is the end of the third measure of meal, the Aquarian age, we may be here before we ever get here. And this is a movable feast. It's not set in stone. It can be whenever we choose. And the more we see and experience inwardly the awakening of our own Christ desire, consciousness, awareness, being, the faster will be the rate of acceleration. Teresa and I have experienced that in our own lives, how there's a speed up, a celestial speed up taking place. And so the Great Rescue Program is, in my personal view, and it's only a personal view, is that we will have arrived at the summit of the Hill of the Lord before the end of the Aquarian age. But effectively, that's what the Great Rescue Program is all about. And Jesus, it's his program. He was given this plan by God, and he is the chief executive officer, if you like, of this program. And he says in the scriptures, the harvest is plenteous, but the laborers are few. And so if we're to join and become one of the laborers for gathering in the harvest, then that will speed up the harvesting process. And we'll all be entering the kingdom as one heart, one mind, one life, one joy. Hallelujah. What else can I say?
Amen.
Very good. Kathy, you want to ask a question or make an observation?
I did. Brian, thank you so much for your books. And these tears are out of love, not sadness. So just to let you know up front. But anyway, I have read 3 of your books.
Oh, hallelujah.
Seek Ye First the Kingdom, and Entering the Kingdom, and Living from the Kingdom. And I have loved all of them. And they were suggested to me by a friend that you and I have in common, who is Mark Palmer.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and he is
Fantastic.
very, very dear young man to me, and we're only Facebook friends, but still that doesn't make it any less, as you've already mentioned.
Absolutely.
And anyway, he and I feel that we have known each other in other lifetimes.
Yes.
And so anyway, everything that you have said today about the extremes of you and John both have touched on this, the extremes of going, feeling like my heart and my head is joining after many, many years of being a devoted student of the course. Then I go through these extreme days of desolate loneliness and, giving up the small self that is occurring within me. I have no doubt that that's what's happening. So I just want to say thank you for everything that you've done and for your books.
Okay.
Yeah, I can just feel the love, and thank you too, John, and thanks everybody for being here. It's just wonderful.
Thank you.
Amen.
You.
Hallelujah.
Bless you, and hallelujah indeed.
Hallelujah. Even for the bad days, because my trust is growing so much deeper.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Lynn?
Thank you for sharing, Kathy.
Namaste, mighty companions. What a blessing to be here. Thank you, Brian, John, Bud, everybody. I'd like to read a poem that I'm so glad I was blessed to be able to write. I call it Embraced.
Oh.
We are led in sync through grace of love, in remembrance of our light as one. Mighty companions, we are blessed, as love's need is just to share. In gratitude for breadcrumbs in stories form, separate journeys come together. Voice of spirit sings out loud. Mwah.
Okay, who else would like to talk to Brian? You got your opportunity, folks. No?
I have a question for Brian.
Okay, good. Thank you, bud.
So, Brian, as you've been going through this amazing experience of writing your books and sharing your heart, what have you done when you've gone through your own dark night of the soul as you're dealing with whatever you're thinking about in the publication of the book, the challenges that you had? Can you speak to how you moved through those?
Well, as you started asking this question, an event or a period in our lives in the mid-1970s came very much to mind. We were going through a very difficult time in our relationship, and the finances were not doing at all well. It was a real struggle. And so I was wondering whether I needed to be doing something more to focus on earning more money or doing something. I didn't know what it could possibly be. And Jesus listened to this as I poured out my heart, and he said to me, if you were to abandon this path, this journey that you're on, it would be anathema to you. Well, I knew without a shadow of doubt that what he said was the absolute truth, and that I really didn't have any alternative but to soldier on. But knowing that he was there, that he loved me and all of us totally, absolutely, has been a massive help and strength. So when I have seen the world closing in around me, I was able to go within and just take solace from his tender, loving arms. He's there. He's there for us all. It doesn't matter if we don't see him with our earthly senses. What's much more important is a willingness and a commitment to accepting that he is there. He is there for all of us. There are no exceptions to that whatsoever. It is impossible for us to shut Jesus away, to send him away. He's there. Whatever our personal attitude towards him, toward ourselves, toward the world's circumstances around us, he's there for us. And if we are willing to open to him, he will bring us palpable comfort. Now, the ego would say, oh yeah, I tried that once, nothing happened, so that proved to me that it doesn't work. So that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It isn't going to work. Well, that is not showing any faith, trust, obedience, to the inner voice or commitment to joining our life with his. And so we can say, yes, I've tried it and it didn't work, so that's the end of it. And for many of us, that will continue to be the case until it isn't anymore, until we've had enough of the negativity, of the contrariness of ego consciousness. And even when we hear from Jesus in A Course of Love that the time of the ego is over and that we're now in the time of Christ, which I equate with the third measure of meal, the kingdom measure, in which all the rescue activity has been completed. So this is now possible, but Jesus tells us that even though the ego has gone, because we've been under the ego's thrall for countless incarnations, patterns have been established, and it's like the synapses in our mind are connected, and we've got to break that old order synapse connection. I've sometimes used the analogy of a herd of cows. I grew up on a dairy farm, and when the cows were being called in to be milked at the end of the afternoon, they would come from whichever field they'd been in grazing into the field adjacent to where the milking was going to take place. And they always walked in single file along a given track toward the milking parlor. And that track became where the grass was worn and a little groove worn in the soil. But they always followed in single file in that particular path. And they stayed true to that, regardless of what was going on. Now we can do the same. We can choose to stay steadfastly on the path, regardless of the dark night of the soul that we may be experiencing at any one time. I have a friend, Linda, I hope you'll forgive me for speaking about this, your experiences since we've known each other. You've had many ups and downs, and at first the downs were long and hard, but as you've stayed steadfast, and I use you as a brilliant example for this, as you've stayed steadfast, the downward drop into the dark night of the soul has become less frequent, and the length of those downward bits of the journey has become shorter. So you are making progress and are an example to us all. And that's, Linda she's just a regular person with no ideas above her station. She accepts where she is. Linda, if you have something you'd like to share about that, I'd be delighted to hear from you on it right here and now. But if you don't feel you want to do it, that's fine. But you are brilliant. We absolutely love you, and we're glad you're in our lives. I hope that has helped.
I can share something. I've got 4 children. They've all got massive problems with each other, and I am right in the last month handing it all over. I keep handing over, but this time the handing over is releasing me. And I've had I live in an old Victorian house, and next door neighbour has got these trees, conifers. They were like 15, 20 feet high, and I'm trying to sell the house, but regardless of that, it was blocking out all my light. And the man next door had a heart attack, and he hasn't been there for 4 years. And I've tried getting in touch with him. I've sent him about 4 emails, and been very polite. And then I've had to trust and hand it over. I didn't know what else to do. And then on Friday, this Friday just gone, my son, my eldest son, phoned and said, I'll be round tomorrow to cut those trees down. He said, I've spoken to Noel and I'm coming round. Now, I've wanted this doing for years, 10 years. And then by just letting go and trusting that I've never seen so much light in my garden. It's just one of those simple little things. And yet to me, it is massive. I had let go and let Jesus take over.
And Jesus is interested in everything in our lives. And the old order of thinking would be, oh, Jesus is far too busy to concern himself with your petty little thing about some trees shading your garden. You've got to consider the really important stuff. Well, everything's important.
Yeah, and what I was thinking is, what's happening is the light has come into my garden. The light has come. And
wonderful.
I'm trying to sell my house. I'm not materialistic. Everything I've got secondhand. It's not. And I've been cleaning and tidying. I've had 16 people come and stay in my house over the 24 years I've been here. Everyone says, you've got something written across your face. And my other son left. He just went. And my lodger, I said, I know I need to sell the house, and he's gone. But I keep finding muckier and muckier little bits. And what it's telling me is the bigger stuff I'm forgiving. So all the little bits now are coming up. All the little bits that I haven't looked at are showing themselves, and I can actually clean them now and let them go. So that's where my life is. That I'm not doing anything brilliant or anything like that, but I'm letting my house is in the hands of Jesus, and I'm trusting. Either I'll stay here or I won't. But
you just said you're not doing anything brilliant, but in Jesus's eyes, you are doing something that is utterly brilliant, and that is surrendering, accepting, and allowing. And that is a life-transforming thing. And all of us can do that. We can all do it. And it's only old order consciousness that says, oh, all my little stuff is nothing. Well, it's all big stuff as far as Jesus is concerned, if it's helping us to move in the right direction. Thank you, Linda. Bless you. See you soon.
The wonderful metaphor.
Yeah. Let's go to Jacqueline. Jacqueline, you want to share? And then Rosie.
Okay. All right. So I guess I just wanted to comment on what we were just talking about with Linda, because it does seem sometimes like the journey gets really dark because we have to bring up all that old stuff, right? You can't keep anything hidden. You got to bring it up. But the important part is what Brian said, is you have to stay steadfast, because I seem to go through a lot of very dark moments. But the only thing I do during those dark moments is I call to Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and whatever I can hold on to, how, like I'll do, like if there's a class or a Zoom call or something, anything that's available, any kind of joining. And I live with a friend who studies the Course in Miracles, so we can do altar sessions, or just to kind of surround yourself or allow Jesus and the Holy Spirit. what I'm learning to do is allow them to surround me with as much love as I can handle at this time, you know, kind of in physical form or in my mind. And that's what supports me during those times of darkness, you know, when the stuff is coming up and I'm like, whoa, because I keep being reminded of that in my mind. I think how Jesus says in the Course that as you go deeper into the foundation of the ego's thought system, it can get a little bit, you know, like we have to go back. Jesus says, let me guide you back to where you began this false thinking, you know. And so as I'm going back, I have to remember that he's there with me. He hasn't left me. He's there with me. But boy, being steadfast and truly that being your one desire, like to, you know, to come into the light and be willing to recognize that there is no separation from any of God's creation. That's the lifeline, you know, and whatever relationship, you know, and the strong relationship with Spirit and all our brothers, you know, everywhere. It's all like a miracle, as Brian was saying, a celestial speed up. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Bless you for that.
Yeah, bless you.
One morning,
Bless us all.
One morning I woke and it was, I had a huge list of things that weren't getting done. And I did this kind of help me God thing, you know. And I immediately got, well, help yourself. You know what to do. It's like, oh yeah, I do know what to do. It's like, you know, just, you know, gut it on through, you'll make it. It's okay. I'm here, but in the meantime, you don't need to bother me about this. Let's go to Rosie.
One step at a time.
One step. Yeah, the only way out is through. Is you know, so often the answer to it. Or when Churchill says, "When you're going through hell, keep going."
Right. Hi, John. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Rosie.
I had a question back to when you first started speaking at the beginning of the session, and you spoke about how wanting Jesus and wanting him from your heart and nothing else. I forget your exact words, but would you please speak more to that, what that was like, felt like, how, you know, how you did that, what that looks like, how you do that?
Yeah. Well, it's a feeling more than that. That's where it gets to us. And I can honestly say that my desire to experience his livingness personally as a one-on-one experience, rather than just reading about him in the Bible or hearing what other people had to say about him, grew in intensity until it was an ache, a palpable ache in my soul. And so I'd like to think I wasn't actually pleading with him, although I dare say in my naivety, as I think I was about, I think I was 22 when he actually did come to me, when he manifested in his glory in that basement lodging. But regardless of whether there was some or a lot of pleading, it was sincerity. And Jesus knows, feels, experiences our sincerity. And if we just want to be able to brag about, oh yes, Jesus is my pal, that isn't going to work. It is the sincerity which arises here. It's not much to do with this. It's to do with this. And he doesn't care whether we've got fancy words in our prayers, because he knows our heart, and that the desire of our heart for experiencing his lordship, if you like, lordship in the sense of tenderness, caring, not high and mighty, supercilious. He is tender. He is, I've often had to use, for want of any other way of describing him, as ordinary Now that may sound as if I'm doing him down, but ordinariness is something we can relate to. And he wants us to accept him as our friend. How can we accept someone who's lording it over us up in some celestial space on his throne, his clouds of glory? He wants us to accept him as our friend on equal terms. We think, oh yes, we want Jesus to be our friend, but he wants us to be his friend. It's equal. There is only equality in the kingdom. There are no hierarchies. We're all equal. And I know John will confirm that Jesus emphasizes this over and over throughout A Course in Miracles. There is only equality. And that's a point that I would really love to emphasize. Has that helped? Is your name Rosie?
Yes.
Rosie.
Yes, thank you. And I had one more. Do you think your journey would have been different if you had not seen Jesus?
I get asked that a lot. How do you see Jesus? Well,
but if I'm sorry, for you personally, do you think it would have been different if you had not seen him, if he had not manifested to you as he did?
I'm sure my journey would have been very different.
Yeah.
But the thing that I am certain about is that all this was agreed between him and me before I incarnated. Now that may sound tremendously arrogant on my part, and it's said only in absolute spiritual humility and sincerity. We all have life before incarnation, and most of us haven't the faintest idea what that entailed or what was involved. But Jesus told me this. He said that this had been agreed between us. He said either at least 2 occasions I can remember him confirming that to me. And I know of a certainty that that is possible for any and all of us. Most of us are allowing our negativity to hold us back. He doesn't want that at all. He wants us to be accepting that we are his friend, that he loves us, and he is there to help us. He said to me 3 or 4 months before he actually manifested in his glory, he spoke through my spiritual mentor, whose name was Olga Park. She passed away in 1985. He said to me, the first thing I ever heard him speak, albeit Olga said, "The master is here, he's speaking to you. You won't be able to hear him yet, but I will tell you what he's saying and you can answer and he'll hear you." So she said, Jesus is saying to you, what is your desire? 4 words. What is your desire? Well, I was about 20 at that time, 21 maybe. And I was quite intimidated by, here's the head honcho asking me a very direct personal question that if I got the answer wrong, I might be in some difficulty. So I said quite tentatively, to serve you according to your will. And he replied saying, through Olga, that isn't actually how it works. How it works is you have come into this earthly life bringing with you potential to accomplish certain things. My job is to help you to develop that potential so that in due season it will bear much fruit. And so that completely changed my whole attitude. The church tells us we're here to serve God. And I think most of us probably think that in some way, God or Jesus or both. But how are we going to do it? Because we're so ill-equipped. We're sinners, we're unworthy, we know nothing about eternity. How can we possibly help him? Well, when we're on the beginning of our journey, we can't help him, but he can help us. And he is inestimably better equipped to help us than we are to help him. And when we have allowed him to help us, then we will be able to join the laborers to bring in the harvest, because he has taught us how to do it. And that's what he did with his 12 disciples, sent them out to preach the gospel of the kingdom, etc. But he had to prepare them for that. And so he's been preparing me, and he's preparing anyone and everyone who is willing to be prepared and made ready. We've all brought with us potential. I can see from the energy emanating from your countenance, Rosie, that you have that gift, you have that ability. You may feel as if the potential is not being developed or fulfilled, and that, as so many of us feel, our life is our purpose. If we don't know what our purpose is, we're a failure, blah, blah, blah. But you have that potential. We all have it. And I can see that you're willing to say, okay, I'm going to go with this because Jesus is with me and he's going to help me. Bless you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your words. Thank you so much.
Bless you, Rosie. I love you.
Love you too. Thank you.
I love you.
Anyone else? Oh, Alice.
Hi. I have a friend here that's joining me today. She's also got multiple clairs as well, and she works with teachers on the inner plane too, but not specifically Jesus. Can you address your own experience with any other teachers on the inner plane? Certainly the world religions represent various different internal teacher trainings, not always called the Holy Spirit or Jesus. How have you addressed that with people of various different faiths or traditions or non-traditions that reject religion altogether and just say, I want a direct experience with spirit, whatever name you want to call it?
Well, the spirit world, what some people call the afterlife, there are untold numbers of souls who have walked the earthly path to a greater or lesser extent and now have laid aside their body, and so they're in spirit. They're all accessible to us, and if we make ourselves accessible to them, and this is what I'm about to say is crucial, we must place ourselves in the care, guidance, and protection of the one that we accept as being able to be our carer, guide, and protection. And for me, that's been Jesus. But there are lots of others who are closely aligned with Jesus, untold millions, billions. The numbers aren't important, but the spirit world is full of souls functioning at various levels. Some who've lived a dissolute life here, where there's been lots of darkness in their life, they lay aside their body. Nothing miraculously changes when that transfer comes about. They still remain at the same level of consciousness or unconsciousness. So we need to be kept safe from interpolators coming in. Interlopers is the word I was looking for. And so we can place ourselves in the care, guidance, and protection of Jesus, the Holy Spirit, Granny, whoever, and they will keep us safe. And then we can begin our exploration of our connectedness with untold others in spirit. I'd like to share, I hope this isn't going too far off track from your question, but I'd like to share an event that happened a year ago. I had two brothers, both of them passed away within the last year or a bit. Ian was the oldest, and he laid aside his body in May of last year. Now he was bipolar. He was very negative about this world. It was always somebody else's fault, the government, the next door neighbor, immigrants, whoever. And he was completely one-pointed in his focus on that. The world is going to hell in a handbasket, and that's all there is to it. And he, although there were opportunities when he could have inquired of Teresa and me about our spiritual journey, he never did, because he was fearful of hearing the answer. He rejected all the reality of eternity on the basis that this world is all there is. So he laid aside his body on May the 17th last year. Now his son phoned me at 10 o'clock on the Saturday night, and he said, Dad's in a coma. He's been unresponsive for hours, but the last faculty we lose is hearing. So if you'd like to say a few words to him, I'll hold the phone against his ear and you can speak to him. So I told him that I loved him, that I was grateful for our sibling relationship, and sending him love and blessings for his onward journey. And then his son took the phone and he said to me, Dad heard every word you said. I know this of a certainty because his eyelids were flickering as you were speaking, and his eyes had been unresponsive for hours. And when you finished speaking, he raised his head off the pillow and he hadn't moved his body for hours. Well, that was Saturday night. Sunday lunchtime, Dan phoned and he said, Dad's gone. That was about 2 o'clock Sunday lunchtime. About 12 hours later, in the small hours of Monday morning, Ian, my brother, came to me in the bedroom in the middle of the night, in the dark. I saw him clearly, I heard him. It isn't just the body, it's the mannerisms, it's the energy coming from the person, and you get to know them well over a lifetime together. And he said, he spoke just 3 words. He died of cancer. He spoke 3 words. I'm okay now. That's all he said. But I knew that he didn't just mean from his bodily ailments. He meant from his mind, from his troubled mind, that he'd been so confused about this world. And because I had held him in the light, I'd sent love and blessings. And he knew that they were real, because when you're in spirit, you can't pretend that the person's words are just words. You get the energy. So he knew. And then later that same Monday, later on, I was sitting at my desk here, and I was proofing the manuscript for my 7th book. This was, excuse me, it was May. And I was reading from the manuscript on the screen, silently, as one obviously would. And suddenly I became aware of Ian standing about 6 feet away from me. And he was, I'd never experienced this before, but he was listening to me speaking the words in my mind, not out loud, but he was hearing them. He wasn't reading off the screen as I was. He was actually listening with his soul, if you like, his increased consciousness having been released from his limited body. And it completely changed his life, transformed his whole attitude. And he's been with me gung-ho for everything that Teresa and I have been doing for the last 50 plus years, following Jesus, learning about eternity, about reality, about who we are, living it, being it. And so Ian is now, he's a disciple, if you like, of Jesus. He's a follower. He's right with us, and he's joined. Now, there are untold others who may have laid aside their body in bewilderment, but having been helped after their passing, have decided that the kingdom of heaven, and including the kingdom of heaven on earth, is actually attainable. And I've been told from Spirit on a number of occasions by a number of different beings, souls, Jesus, we have children in spirit who never made it through their term of pregnancy. One of them is Christopher, who'd be about 45 or something now in Earth years. And he told us about 25 years ago, when he was a teenager, the kingdom of heaven, or the great rescue program of Jesus, three things. The great rescue program is all-encompassing, it is infallible, and it is unstoppable. And I've heard Jesus say the same thing, and others. Now, those three words are very powerful. All-encompassing, in other words, nothing is missed out in the Great Rescue Program. It is infallible, as you'd expect from God, and with Jesus as the executive director of, and it's unstoppable. So Jesus has many helpers in spirit. Some of them are our relatives. Some of them are your relatives. I don't know if you've got grandparents who are still embodied or have laid aside their body. But whoever, people we know, family, forebears, others who are drawn to us by either by our asking for help or by our commitment to being truly helpful and wholly harmless. But we're surrounded by loved ones. Not being able to see them is irrelevant. It's willingness to accept that they're there, and then we get their energy, and eventually we'll get hearing them. But we must accept that they're present, and we must communicate with them or commune with them. That not having a body with ears to hear is irrelevant, because they hear with their mind and they see with their mind. We're all one in this. There's only one of us, and it's heart and mind that is joined as one. I hope that's been helpful, Alice.
Well, as I said, I'm clairaudient, clairvoyant. I have all these clairsenses and sense presences with me, and I don't know my name, but I felt guided by Jesus before I even knew I was being guided by Jesus for almost 15 years, maybe even longer, with a bunch of peace projects, which my friend Carol got involved and met me because of that. And she was following inner guidance and got, a sense of a number of other people that we were all being guided. So did you have a question, Carol?
Oh,
Can you pull up so we can see you?
It's simply that.
Hello, Carol.
Hi. Hi.
Nice to meet you, dear.
Thank you. I am an Ekis, which means guided by Holy Spirit under Sri Harold Klemp. And the thought is that as each of us is loved and devoted and cared about, that we can do that as human divine souls. And that is very much what I hear here. And I am very welcomed and happy to hear your particular views and your particular stances, because it's quite different than the traditional Christian things that I've ever heard. And so I thank you for it.
Bless you, dear. Thank you for sharing that.
We've actually come to the end of our time, believe it or not. It all happens so quickly when we're having fun.
Yes.
Well, we like to usually end with, unless there was somebody else that has something that they really would like to share first before we go. If not, what we like to do is we like to end with the Lord's Prayer from A Course in Miracles. Go ahead, Rose.
The Lord's Prayer from A Course in Miracles. Forgive us our illusions, Father, and help us to accept our true relationship with you, in which there are no illusions and where none could ever enter. Our holiness is yours. What can there be in us that needs forgiveness when yours is perfect? The sleep of forgetfulness is only the unwillingness to remember your forgiveness and your love. Let us not wander into temptation, for the temptation of the Son of God is not your will. And let us receive only what you have given, and accept but this into the minds which you created and which you love. Amen.
And now let's go into gallery view, and we can share our goodbyes with each other.
The hush of heaven holds my heart today. 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 The hush of heaven holds my heart The hush of heaven holds my heart today. 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 The hush of heaven